there. Okay, I think we're going to have the next part of our talk going on to bring up Miranda Ward and the panelists. David Fawcett, are you in the room? Okay, and why don't you? I don't know if you're comfortable. Come on up and take a seat up here, and if I could have Cecilia Chung come on up. And then Reginald Smith and Dion Smith. I want you guys to come on up. Okay.
All right, so good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Mandisa, for providing that context and that keynote. We're going to basically have our panelists extend that discussion in a moment. But first, I just want to thank Dr. Rana, who's probably running around somewhere here, as well as Patty and Joanne for the invitation for me to serve as today's moderator for our plenary. We are here to talk about Stigma No More is 2024, right? Yes. So here we are, 15 years in, right, with this international conference, and I'll say that I've been to 12 consecutive conferences, and I know that many of you have also been to many of these conferences because I see you, hugging people. It's like a reunion here. Get to see family, right? Get to see those colleagues that you work with. So I love, love, love that. But by a show of hands, how many of you are at this conference for the very first time? Wow. Okay, well, welcome. I love that. And hopefully you come back for the 16th annual. All right. So what I like to do is, even though you have the conference app and you can read the full bios of each of our panelists, I'm just going to give an abbreviated introduction to each of them. And like Mandisa talked about earlier when she brought in the work of Toni K. Bambara, it's really important to really hear the stories, right? Really kind of think of, who's invited to tell their story. And so we actually have extended invitations for our esteemed panelists to share their stories. And we want to be in conversation with you. So we actually are going to open up the floor for each of you to share your story. You can basically come to the mic. At some point, we'll probably circulate a mic, and you can pose questions to the panelists or just kind of share your thoughts on today's theme. So, and also let me just go ahead and shout out the DC CFAR, the DC Center for AIDS Research. I'm a member. I know George, where's George? George is also a member of the DC CFAR. Do we have any other DC CFAR members? Okay, so one of the panelists that are going to be, let me just go in order. Let's see. David on the far end actually is an author, a professor, and he's also a psychotherapist and sex therapist who specializes in sexualized drug use, LGBTQ issues, trauma, and mental health outcomes related to physical illness such as HIV. And so, as I mentioned, he is an author of a book called Lust, Men, and Meth, A Gay Man's Guide to Sex and Recovery. So I'm sure he'll probably talk about some of his work and what got him into this particular field. Up next is Cecilia. So Cecilia, okay, got a fan club. All right, I love it. So Cecilia Chung is the senior advisor at Transgender Law Center, a health commissioner of San Francisco, and internationally recognized leader who advocates for HIV, AIDS awareness and care, LGBTQ equality, and social justice. And then to Cecilia's right, you actually will see Dion Smith. And Dion, yes, is the deputy director of the Reginald and Dion Smith Foundation. She does work with her husband leading this work. Their mission is to improve total wellness of families affected by HIV, viral hepatitis, and substance use disorders by providing education, advocacy, resource, and linkage to care. And last but certainly not least is Reggie. Reggie is the executive director of the Reginald and Dion Smith Foundation. And He also describes himself as a holistic health practitioner, a speaker, an advocate, an author. So we have another author on our panel. His book is actually called Resurrection: Participate in Your Own Salvation or Be Complicit in Your Own Demise. Yes. All right. So, as I said, here we are at, the 15th year having this conversation. And, we want to celebrate some milestones, right? We've come a long way when we think about the work of HIV and health equity and really kind of stigma reduction, though we do have some ways to go, as Mandisa reminded us, right? So in some ways, the medical advancements that we've had in HIV, the social advancements haven't really caught up with that, right? So one of the things I want to do is I just want to go ahead and start us off with really kind of thinking about some questions that start in the past, where we've been, right? And then we'll move to the present moment. So first, let's go ahead and actually hear from both Reggie and Dion, reflecting on our past. So when it comes to talking about sex, sexuality, gender roles, negotiating condoms, what would you say are the major forms of stigma, and what does that look like?
All right. So thank you very much.
Wait, do we have a mic?
I think
Oh, you have it on.
is
Okay,
this
perfect.
thing on?
Can y'all
Is this
hear?
thing on?
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So thank you very much for having us, first and foremost. This is a fantastic conference, and it's been 15 years. Thank you very much. It's good to see you again. 15 years, time passes by. The more you see, the faster it goes. And welcome to all of the first-time guests. Thank you. It's always good to see people that are interested in what's going on. Excuse me. Thank you for your presentation, for contextualizing what HIV is all about and how stigma and how the trauma that we experience on a regular basis here in America, especially being a black man in America, it's a hell of a thing. And just to level set, if I may, when people say stigma, a lot of times I'm not sure that we're all on the same page. In terms of the definition of what stigma is, because stigma is, so for me, I know that trauma leads to stigma, but just if I may, what does stigma mean to you? What is the definition of stigma? Now, that's a result of stigma, but what is the definition of stigma? Anybody in the red jacket? Thank you very much. And I also would say, and on a personal level, it's being more concerned about what other people think about me than I am about what I think about myself. Because the reason that stigma has power is because we give it power. Now, I'm not saying that in the legal sense that there are things in the power structure that affect us as a result of stigma, but I'm saying that after 15 years, and thank you for the work that we've been doing to keep this in the forefront, that now I think we need to maybe take a turn and start looking a little bit more inward at the power. And this, as in COVID and this election, should have taught us something. I can't change the world, but what I can change is my damn self. And in our community, I would suppose and suggest that even in the HIV community, that you said something about the viral divide. I think we've been divided by stigma internally between the different communities, LGBTQIA. So my wife and I are a heterosexual couple. We've been together for 39 years. Yeah, that deserves a hand. Yeah, give it up. I was diagnosed with AIDS and hepatitis C in 1988, probably contracted it in 1984, more than likely as a result of IV drug use. So I'm an ex-dope fiend, and so there's a number of different stigmas that we've been living with over a lifetime. But what I've found is that the power of stigma comes from me being more concerned about what other people think about me. Once I, through the courage of telling our stories, once I was able to identify myself in other people and gain the courage to tell our story, the power of stigma was diminished immensely. And internally in our community, I think that so now outside, we can't change them. So this election and everything that we're doing, we have to come together. We have to come together as a community now. I mean, it should be extremely evident how we have to galvanize, and we can't be separated by being concerned about what other people think or what we expect them to do. It should be evident that they're not going to do what we want them to do. That it's up to us to make the changes, and that hence the title of my book is Participating in Our Own Salvation, or lest we be complicit in our own demise. And, you know, we're at the point now where the common goal that we all have as a community is our wellness, which is why we focus on wellness, awareness, and recovery. Our spiritual, mental, physical, emotional wellness is something that humans are a curious lot. HIV is a virus that seems to be smarter than us. It's divided us in a way that won't allow us to realize it's not a GIV disease, it's not a it's a human virus, and it's looking simply for the weakest link. And so the way that we can win is by building up our immune system. Thank God for the medications, but that could get turned off in a moment as well. And so it's really about the behaviors and the way that we are living. So changing our lifestyle, which is why we created a virtual community focused on wellness, awareness, and recovery. And I'd be happy to share that with you so that we can have a place through God's grace to come together and share our healing solutions outside of, it's a private virtual community, so it's outside of the social networks, and empower ourselves in the way that I believe that we can. Now, as a heterosexual couple, I'm sure my wife is negative. We're what I call a heteromagnetic couple, and she has her own perspective, and I'll let her share that. But I would say that inside of the HIV community, the dominant narrative is that HIV is a gay disease. And so it's not. And as heterosexuals, the numbers that you were talking about, we're not seeing. And so it keeps people from getting information and sharing their story. And that is the way that stigma is showing up in 2024, and still over the 15 years. But we're going to continue to work on that, but I think that we can be the model of right now between us and inside of the community, that when we show and give love and cohesiveness, then that's going to be the thing that's going to encourage people. We're watching it now. People tell their stories and have better health outcomes as a result, because stress and secrets are keeping us sick. And so, you know, the other part of our community that has been lost is people that are impacted. For each one of us that have been diagnosed, there are 5, 10 people, family members, that are impacted. And it's not just HIV. We know that it's so many different things. My friend Lisa, you know, there's so many different things. Parents who are parents of the incarcerated, we have people who suffer from or are dealing with all types of other health maladies. The thing that brings us together is wellness. And Dion has a very unique perspective about people who are impacted, and I would love for you to share that with your fine self.
Oh.
Well, as a wife of someone who has been diagnosed HIV positive and being impacted, the stigma that I suffered was not wanting you all to know that my husband was positive, because my thought was, well, what are you going to think about me? Do you think that I have low self-esteem or low self-worth that I would be with a man who's positive? And the truth of the matter is that I fell in love, you know, and I was afraid that you all were going to judge me. My family, I come from a large family, my brothers and sisters, and I didn't know what my mother or anybody was going to think. And I was afraid that they were going to tell me, and I was pregnant. We found out when I was pregnant. You know, we got pregnant and we got tested and he came back positive. I came back negative, and it's like, oh shoot, what are we going to do now? And I went straight into denial. To a certain degree, you know, I just shut down. I didn't want to share it. And when he decided that he was going to share his story, I wanted to kill him. Because it was shared in our church, you know, and I was devastated. But what I found out was that I wasn't alone. There were other people who were going through what I was going through, and they were coming to me on the side, and they were saying, well, how did you survive that? And I began to tell my own story, you know, of how I just had to surrender. I had to know that God had a plan for me. And when Reggie got sick in 2005, you know, people would ask me, why did I stay? And I would say, because I didn't think about leaving, because at that time, that was my truth. But then I found out later on that I stayed because God had a plan for me. And it was for me to advocate for those that were just like me, those kids and the mothers and the fathers and the brothers and the sisters that were living in shame because someone that they loved dearly was infected by HIV. You know, and today I am free. You know,
yes.
There is, I didn't know the freedom that will come with disclosure, you know, and I have no secrets now, and I'm free to move around and to help others that are just like me. We do have the virtual community, and the greatest gift that I've received in the last couple of years is having this virtual community where people are just like me come and they share, and they've been holding on to secrets for over 30 years. And just the healing that they receive and just telling their story. You know, our stories are so powerful, you know, that I can't even explain how getting free, what that feels like, you know, but all I know is that I found that people who matter don't judge, and those that judge don't matter. And I'm living my truth, and I'm holding my head up high, and I remember coming here 15 years ago and how ashamed I still was. And I don't feel that shame anymore. I'm just grateful that God chose me and that I'm here today. And thanks for allowing me to be here.
So thank you so much for sharing your story. We absolutely appreciate that as we really make sense of stigma and what it's really rooted in. I know oftentimes when I open up conversations and workshops on talking about sex and sexuality, I ask, you know, the group, okay, so what are some words that we use to say the word vagina, right? They say, oh, coochie and vajayjay, right? And then penis, oh, ding dong, or, you know, Peter. And I'm like, okay, so why is it that we have all these long lists of names for, you know, anatomical parts like a vagina or a penis or breast, right? But we, like if I ask you to come up with another word for knee, you can't think of one. And we know that it's rooted in that stigma. We're supposed to feel ashamed of sex and sexuality. And so we really want to ensure that in this conversation that we are normalizing these conversations and that we are relying on sex-positive language, which actually brings me to the question that we have for Cecilia as we really think about HIV testing, partner notification, especially off the heels of the discussion that Mandisa just offered around how criminalized HIV is. Can you share a little bit about what is really continuing to contribute to the stigma for why some people don't want to know their HIV status?
Okay, first of all, I had no idea how much I needed to be here until some recent events that happened, and you know where it happens, you know, on the Capitol Hill, you know, like.
Okay, I don't think I can hear you. Let me just move this up a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, is that better? Let's see.
And is it better?
Not really?
Is it better now?
Okay, thank you, thank you.
I'll just do it.
Okay,
Hold on one
you
second.
got it? Thank you.
Okay, so I think it's better to do it this way. Yeah, so, you know, some current event that's happening in development in the Hill, you know, like that really help us understand how deep stigma could impact people's belief system. It's irrational, it has no factual base whatsoever. But they're able to use that to create some kind of panic, for us to like make all these like bad judgment against someone who hasn't even gone to Congress yet. She just got elected, and they already start trying to tell her which bathroom she cannot use. And all in the name of protecting women and girls. I didn't see them protecting men and boys, from the churches when there were like massive sexual abuse that happened in different churches. Not one of them have spoke out about that. So we know that this is just a bait. And because of this bait, it's impacting our community. Children are being impacted the most. And we are also seeing some states passing discriminatory laws that would make it unsafe for people to disclose who they are or to disclose the HIV status. I have an example here is a certain member of my community got sexually assaulted. And she's afraid to go to the police because HIV non-disclosure and HIV transmission laws could put her in jeopardy before, they could get the perpetrator arrested. And so because of that fear, she kept quiet. These are the things that are keeping us from going to the doctors, to going to a clinic to get tested, because we don't believe it's safe for us to do that. And it's so sad to think that 40 years later, we're still in that same space. We allow folks to use fear to control what we are able to disclose who we are and what we're afraid to. And this is the attitude that needs to change. And I said that I'm so glad I'm here today is because many of you have seen this in the past. And I think that there's currently the internet has this meme going on. It's a quote by George Takei that says, it's not about the bathroom, just like it was never about the fountain. It came from the same kind of accusatory languages, that they invent these languages to make us dehumanized and less than. And we can do something about it. It's great to be here because we know that the only way to fight stigma is through love and acceptance. Like, I have my family back in my life. That's why I feel so much stronger as a person and so much confident in myself. And I was able to do all the things that I'm doing today and say, screw you. You can say whatever you want. But that's not the reality yet for our children and their support systems, because we represent 1% of the entire U.S. populations. And, and up to today, there were 615 pieces of legislations, that's being passed to ban healthcare for us, that is making it a crime to support transgender children because parents love them, and that now becomes child abuse. So if we continue to let that happen, we are going back 50 years. So I have to say that out loud because here we are, we kept saying that we want to end the HIV epidemic and we want to get rid of stigma. But if we don't speak up when people are perpetuating this disinformation and stigma, then it's gonna continue. So it's time for us to band together to show our children that, yes, it matters that school teaches about race. Yes, it matters, that children need to have a safe place to be themselves. Being themselves means that you don't get to control what pronouns I use. That's my prerogative, not yours. And if you freak out about it, go talk to a therapist.
Right.
Right.
Your sponsor. Call your sponsor.
And so don't let that fear becomes our problem, because that's what they're doing to us now. And and I hope we can speak up so that we have a better chance in addressing the stigma that's killing us.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So as a social behavioral scientist, I've actually interviewed minoritized patients, and they actually had, shared in my research how they were offended if their doctor asked them to get an HIV test. And so you may be wondering, like, why would they be offended? You're in a primary care setting, we want to prevent HIV, don't you want to know your status? Well, because they know that their clinicians are not asking everyone, right? So you think about it, the last time you went to see your PCP, no matter why you went in, they're going to ask you those set of questions about depression, right? That's considered routinized, right? It's the standard of care, but they're not doing that. They're not having the standard of care of asking all patients about getting an HIV test, which means that they're relying on their perception of risk, AKA clinician bias, of who they're going to cherry pick and actually pose those questions to. So there is some work to be done to, really try to routinize and remove the stigma in even how we kind of routinize care. But to pivot from this primary prevention discussion, let's think about secondary prevention. Those who are living with HIV may not also feel comfortable getting on treatment. So David, if you might share, what is it, what role does stigma play and why someone, like we were talking about, Mandisa talked about earlier, viral suppression for those who actually decide to, take the treatment. There's a range of reasons why people don't. Let's talk about that, and also participating in clinical trials.
Great. Well, good morning, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm back at this conference. I've been here over the years from, I think, maybe not the first one, but certainly early on, and it's a pleasure. It's a sad state that we still are dealing with stigma at such an ingrained and deep level, but I get kind of refueled by being around you folks and sharing our stories. Like Reggie, I'm a double winner, I guess. I was diagnosed, tested positive in 1988, and I know I was actually came across the virus about probably 82. So, and I was diagnosed when I had an opportunistic infection, as most people were in those days. And then sadly, and just to weave stigma in, that's still, in my home state of Florida, the bulk of people in the Black community are still only being diagnosed when they come down with some opportunistic infection. They're not getting that testing or the healthcare or the access, and I think stigma plays a large role in that. I'm also a recovering addict and alcoholic, so that I think I have these layers, and a gay man, so I think I certainly understand kind of layers of stigma. I personally took that, my healing journey way back and converted it into working as a professional. I got my social work degree and then a degree in clinical sexology. And so my work for the last 30 years has been dealing with really marginalized communities who have what I call these layers of stigma: addiction, sometimes ethnic racial minorities, sex workers, mental illness, and so on. And so all these layers that people just really are encumbered by. I remember a phrase I hear so many of my clients saying over the years. This is 30 years, and I think it perfectly enacts or enables this idea of stigma, and it's, I feel like damaged goods. And that just still hurts my heart when I hear people say that, but it's so perfectly, I think, captures how that is, right? When we're feeling that, like, who in the world could ever love me, who could be with me, who could stand, who could tolerate me, right? That's some level. And that's that internalized stuff that I certainly understand very well. To the point, I think how this all impacts, I think there's a couple of things. One is that, as I mentioned, sometimes we get delayed diagnoses, right? If there's a stigma enacting here that we are either afraid or don't want to get tested, or because they're HIV criminalization, and I see this a lot, even in the gay community on the apps, where you're asked to disclose your status or not, and if people don't get tested, well, they don't know, right? And that becomes kind of the default answer. I just don't have to go there. So that delayed diagnosis is something that we're seeing showing up still quite a bit, and I think it really is problematic because it's avoidable. And we know that once people get down, or once their T cells fall to the point where there is an opportunistic infection, we can probably get their T cells back up to a manageable level, but we know that they're at risk for all kinds of things down the road. As my generation of folks with HIV were, I had back in the club with 1 or 2 T cells back in the day, and that puts me at risk for cognitive problems and all kinds of physical stuff. It's just we're pushing the problem along. So the deferred diagnosis is one thing. I think there's another thing in terms of adherence, right? If I'm even if I know I'm living with HIV and have medications, if I'm around a family and I haven't told them and don't want to let them know, I may be inconsistent in my medications. I may not take them at all. I may, because people store. I've had people go off medications because family was coming in for a week or two, and they just kind of cleared the house of all that. So that adherence issue is still a huge one. We've gotten much better at those goals nationally of reducing the level of people that were non-adherent, but it still is a huge factor. And then finally, I think we're talking about stigma, this intersectionality is such a huge issue here. As I mentioned, deal a lot with addiction. I deal a lot with mental illness. I'm a trauma therapist, and I will say that trauma underlies almost all of this as well. And I think we are so compartmentalized and siloed, even in the training of professionals. I don't think we do a good job with that intersectionality. There's addiction therapists, there's mental health therapists, there's even HIV specialists, but often they don't talk to each other. And our clients, one single client has all of those things, right? And so I think just to really bring together that whole story, and just to close on this section, I think that the idea of telling a story is so important because it humanizes this. I think that's the issue of when someone is encumbered by this burden of stigma, they're afraid to even tell their story or own their story. And I think to really proudly say it is so freeing. I love what Cecilia said, this being so free. I remember I wrote for a while for The Body, which is an HIV website, and declared kind of at this national level my own status. And I was terrified at first, and then it was incredibly liberating. And I didn't see that coming. But I realized then the power of just owning it and being out there. And I think I have, in many ways, I'm privileged to, it's safer for me in many ways to reveal who I am. And so if I can do that and kind of help people and lend a hand, I'm happy to do that. But I'm so glad to be here and to share the really amazing work of all you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, David, we're actually going to stay with you. We're going to make our way back down the row. Okay, it's going to be my last set of questions, and we're going to open it up because we do want to be in conversation. So,
I'd like to interrupt.
Oh, okay.
Before we go any further, how about this outfit?
Okay, stand up. You want to see the full thing?
You're welcome. Hey, do your thing.
That's hilarious. I love it. Okay, so we have been talking about healthcare, right? And so if we think about it, even though we know healthcare access is really important, and healthcare access is not just can you afford healthcare, can you get to healthcare, but when you do get there, how do you navigate it, right? From a literacy perspective, from language, all of the things. But healthcare actually is only 20% of what determines our health outcomes. The other 80% are all of the things that, the social conditions that we live in. So David, why would we say that housing is HIV prevention?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. And I think it's a wonderful question because I think so often we don't think about housing. Again, we're at recognizing the intersectionalities. But I think housing and the availability of housing is just tremendously consequential in how someone does, right? For one thing, if I have stable housing, I'm at much less risk of engaging in risky behaviors, whether that's substance abuse or even sex work or other kinds of areas where I might be the victim of a crime. So I think that idea of just the stability of it. I mentioned before the idea of adherence and the importance of housing there. If I don't have stable housing, First of all, we know from research that if I don't have stable housing, I'm probably not engaged in healthcare that's routine and ongoing, which we know is so critical for HIV. But housing also allows that adherence, it allows safety, it allows sort of a sense of stability and that I think just is so incredibly important in this. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then Cecilia, earlier we were talking about the importance of being undetectable so that you're untransmittable. What is still necessary at this point to make U equals you a reality?
I think for me, I'm going to venture to say that we need to stop relying on these kind of slogan and campaign to think that it's going to help us get to the finish line. Because Mandisa said that earlier, there's still the viral divide, and usually happens to who? Long-term survivors, because there are more resistance to many of the different medications. So it's not necessarily possible for some of us to be virally suppressed. There's also something called viremia, which means that it's slightly above the undetectable level, but there's not enough conversations about what does that actually mean for our own health, and also, for our partners, who might be HIV negative. So I think that it's really important for us to continue to unpack all these and, not reduce ourselves to a campaign slogan. I mean, even LGBTQII+, that's like reducing ourselves to some kind of like letters. That doesn't really define who we are. And we have to really resist that now, especially in the incoming administration. And another thing that I want to say is, not everyone understands U equals U because we are still preaching to the choir. Those who need to hear that message, chances are they're not in the room. What are we doing to make it an effort? To tell them, this is the reality now for HIV medications. You can live a long life, and you can also have healthy relationship. Who needs to hear that? Everyone. And who knows, the next person who heard that might found themselves fall in love with someone who's HIV positive and feel okay about it. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
All right, so thank you so much, Cecilia, for that necessary critique of the U equals U efforts that are kind of going underway. And so I want us to really think about some of the subpopulations that are affected by HIV. Specifically, right now, we know that Black cisgender women who have sex with men, have the highest number of new HIV cases. So, Dion, what would you think contributes to why Black cisgender women have these really high rates, even though we have all of these advancements? We have PrEP, and it's an injectable form, and we have the pill form, and there's all these HIV prevention messages. What are your thoughts for, like Cecilia talked about, those women, are they not in the room? What's contributing to why there's a missed opportunity to really engage Black cisgender women?
First of all,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
She made that, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she's
Yes.
taking order.
Well, I believe that women want to be loved. And wanting to be loved, and with there being such a shortage of Black men, they don't investigate. They don't take responsibility for their own sexual health. And I believe in 2024 that we're responsible for our own sexual health, and that we need to go to get tested with our mates, and then find out what we need to do as a next step. And I also believe that Black men black heterosexual men don't disclose their status because they don't want to be identified as being gay, because HIV, as far as everybody is concerned, is still a gay disease. When we look at the commercials on TV, we don't see anybody who looks like us. You know, so. That's right. Right, we don't. You know, so when we go out and we share our story, people are surprised, you know, and we're bringing people into the fold because we're letting them know that heterosexuals do contract HIV. You know, and another thing that we don't talk about is we don't talk about the transmission of the woman to the man. In Latin America, they've come to realize that there's a transmission from women to men. We only talk about in this country the transmission from men to women. So nobody really knows their status, and everybody's jumping in and out of the bed. And then I honestly believe that the medications are great. They really, really are. But with the U equals U, you know, people are feeling like that they can just raw dog, you know, and what happens when your viral suppression goes up again and you don't know. We have a person in our community who he was undetectable, and now he's detectable, but he's been having unprotected sex, you know, and his partner hasn't been using PrEP or anything. So she's at risk of being, becoming positive. You know, I get tested regularly. You know, to be honest with you all, we just stopped using condoms. We used condoms for 30 years, you know, and it was when I didn't even want to investigate U equals U. I was afraid. I was like, you know, bunk that. You know, I'm not going to put myself at risk. And then I tried it, and I found out that it worked. You know. Yeah. And I have investigated PrEP. You know, because I want to let my community know that it works. You know, so I'll be the guinea pig to take it back to those of us that are impacted, to let them know that this is another barrier. You know, okay, you don't want to use a condom, use PrEP. You know, so, but I do believe that we want to be loved, so we're not taking responsibility for our own sexual health. And then what happens when we don't, and then we turn up positive, we want to blame somebody. And I don't believe that that should be, it should be like that. If I come up HIV positive, that was my own fault, because I know, you know, and I think that we want to blame someone for our diagnosis. When in 2024, there's no reason for someone to accuse someone of giving them HIV. No one gives you HIV. We're all willing participants because it's no longer a secret that it is out here. You know, so we have a responsibility to protect ourselves, and we don't, you know, and I'm praying that we'll get it together, and we'll come together as a community with all of these letters and stuff. You know, when they ask me for my pronoun is human, because that's a way of keeping us divided too. That we got so much stuff going on is that we're losing the point, because it's just so many distractions going on that we're not focused on what we really need to be focused on, and that's love and coming together as one. So that's my take on it all.
Thank you, Deon. I appreciate that. And I will say that in doing some research on Black cisgender women who actually are on PrEP, one of the things that that I uncovered is that Black women, as a group, recognizing obviously there's lots of diversity amongst Black women, right? We got to start to account for within group differences too. But Black women don't respond well to risk-based language, and when we talk about risk, in campaigns and in media, it's kind of like, oh, I'm not at risk. Like that it basically is in one ear, out the other. What Black women respond to is affirming messaging, right? Sex positive messaging, talking about, you know what, the reason why I want to get on PrEP is because I'm able to enjoy sex, right? Thinking about sex as pleasurable, and thinking about the fact that, you know, like Deon said, you know what, I do want to take responsibility for, you know, my health and have bodily autonomy and decide what happens to me, right? So we do have some ways to go to take what we have learned from Black women who actually are on PrEP and translate that into efforts to reach even more Black cisgender women. So let's actually end here with you, Reggie, and let's actually end on a good note. What are some success stories? Are there any examples of really what has worked when it comes to improving health literacy around HIV and really kind of thinking about, this conversation around stigma?
Sure. Well, using myself as an example, I was, like I said, diagnosed in 1988. I've decided that I needed to change some things in my life. And I was smoking cigarettes, so I stopped smoking cigarettes because the doctor said she wouldn't treat me if I didn't. I stopped eating meat because I realized that the toxins in the meat were not going to be good for me and that it was going to affect my digestive system and just a lot more energy. And besides, there was no medications at the time, so I had to find ways to stay alive. So I started practicing meditation and doing whatever I could to empower myself to stay on the planet because I just turned 68 in October.
Ooh, love it.
Thank God.
Yeah.
We have 4 children. The oldest is 48 and the youngest is 36. We have 8 grandchildren. Thank you very much. I thank God. I thank God I'm alive.
That's awesome, yeah.
And I thank you all for helping me learn how to live a day at a time. So as a success story, I'm trying to share some of the things that have had a positive effect in my life because I want to have the best outcome, and I'm having an extremely good outcome. And I want the same for all my brothers and sisters. But we've been bamboozled, hoodwinked and led astray. And strung out on, and this is an adult group, we just strung out on shit that we don't need and that we can be manipulated with. So, when we talk about recovery, we talk about addictions. And I would say that I haven't been eating meat for a long time, so when I sit down and eat at the table with the family, if you ask somebody to stop eating chicken or stop eating something that they know is killing them, and they can't do it, then I would suggest that that's suicide. And so it's about us empowering ourselves. That's where I can't count. Looking over the history of man, there's always been evil on the planet. And it's gone in cycles. And we're in a cycle now where pain is the greatest motivator. We're going to, like what did Martin say? You're going to learn tonight. Because the way it's coming down now, the separation, there's more of us than there are of evil. There's more love than there is of evil. And it's really a holistic approach that we have to come together and project love on the planet and do what we can to take the power away from those. Now, Method Man said, cash rules everything around me.
Dollar bill, y'all.
Dollar bill.
Yeah.
HIV, so there's a prevalent thought that the reason why we don't have a cure, the reason why we don't have this and that, is because people are making money off of this virus. Cash money. People have put kids and grandkids through college based on, and so, we really have to face some truths about where we are. And the positive part, getting back to what you were saying, is that I think we're getting there. So we're finally getting there. We're becoming more inclusive. We're becoming more visual. My heterosexual brothers are coming to the table now. There's less, we coined the phrase, not only homophobia, but heterophobia. We talked about stigma being afraid of being identified as being gay. So what you're saying is something wrong with being gay. Is really coming together, we as human beings, that's going to make the difference in what's going on and taking a holistic approach. And I'm happy to say that the long-term survivors are here, and we're passing on this information to young people, and that I do see a change. I do see a change. I see that there's more communication. We're starting to get more acceptance about there's treatments and that there's a change. There's got to be some hope involved. You know, there's a lot of negativity, but I do see hope, and I know that love will overcome everything that has been killing us.
All right, so thank you so much. I see multiple warnings that we're over time. But if you don't mind, is it possible to just take this one question here? You have your hand up, right? You have your hand up? I did. Okay. Oh, okay. You have you have no question, just a comment though? Yeah. Okay. I guess you're gonna have to project because we don't have a mic that's going around. Oh, you do? Okay, they said wait. Because we do have an online audience. We want to make sure they can hear you. They're coming with a mic. Awesome.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to say to you, Reggie, is that right?
Yes.
And Dion,
Yeah.
it's wonderful to finally see a beautiful, thriving heterosexual couple being visible, being tangible, and being present. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And while I was sitting here as a person who is licensed and is ordained in my state of Ohio, what I feel my spirit telling me is that those of us who have been traumatized by religion, those who have been traumatized and have been stigmatized by the church, I see you as being lights and being the balm of Gilead to bring healing to those individuals who have been traumatized, stigmatized, and been been told to stay away because God and the Holy Spirit could not love them, and you are living proof it does happen. So thank you for being present, thank you for being tangible, and thank you for being real, and I love that coat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And my second comment is to one of my heroes, and Miss Cecilia Chung.
Yes.
I don't know, it's been years, but you came to Columbus, and I believe in giving flowers where flowers are due. So I'm giving you your flowers. As a trans woman, you came to Ohio, you spoke. I was the only trans person present. And you spoke to me, we had lunch, and I asked you for advice on how to keep going. And you said, you just keep going and you don't give up. So I just want to thank you because of that. I have done it, and I'm from one of those states that is criminalizing our trans children. We just passed 2 laws against trans children in Ohio. We're still waiting on a governor to veto, which we're prepared for our Senate and House to override his veto. But I will say, he did listen to trans parents. He did listen to trans children. He vetoed some of the things they were going to do and overrode it. But I just want to say thank you for being present, because you don't know what a difference that they made when I was ready to walk away. And so I believe you never know whose path you will change in a moment. And I'm so grateful you changed mine. So thank you.
That was a long time.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
So can we take a group picture? Do you want to take a picture of my phone? Oh, no, we just want to take a group picture, though. Do you mind? Can the panelists stand up, please, and we can just take a group picture?
Oh, wait.
Lisa, do you mind? Yes. But I also want on my phone, too. Yeah, she can take the real one, and you can take the one for me. Thank you.
Oops. Let me take this off. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr.